Hey everybody, Marcus here to share one of my favorite Bible stories with you. So this comes from the book of 2 Kings, the third chapter, verses 23 and 24. So 2 Kings chapter 3 verses 23 and 24. So this is about the prophet Elisha, this guy who was around in the Old Testament. He was taught by the great prophet Elisha, but this is a story with him. But before I jump into the story, I need you to see my bald head. Yep, see the light gleaming off it there. That'll make sense in just a second for why I showed you my bald head and why this is one of my favorite Bible stories. So, just jumping into it. All right, verse 23. From there, Elisha went up to Bethel. While he was on the way, some little boys came out of the city and jeered at him. "Go away, Baldy! Go away, Baldy!" My bald head. The prophet turned and saw them, and he cursed them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore 42 of the children to pieces. Okay, so I lied. This is not one of my favorite Bible stories of all time. In fact, it horrifies me. 42 children. Okay, so just imagine the picture. So Elisha comes out of the city, he's walking around, and there are some kids there who start pointing at him and making fun of him for being bald. And he just loses his cool and curses them, and then 42 children get mauled by bears. It's weird. It's horrifying. It's awful. So some scholars, when they talk about this, they say, well, maybe it might be that Elisha had shaved his head because his mentor, the prophet Elijah, had just died, and maybe this was a sign of mourning. And they're like, oh yeah, so that perfectly explains why, it would be justified for 42 children to die to bears for making fun of him. He was in mourning. That doesn't justify it. Are you kidding me? By no stretch of the imagination does that justify it. So what's going on here? How do we explain this? So if you read through the Old Testament, there will be many times where, everything's good, yeah, you're just reading, and then out of nowhere there just comes something that's like, what did I just read? What is going on? And this is an example of one of those sorts of scenarios there. So what do we do with this? How do we wrestle with this? What is the meaning there? So here's option number 1 of what you can do with a story like this. Well, we know that when these stories were written, they were actually written down quite a long time after these people had lived, and it's possible that some legends got mixed in with some things that actually happened, and oh well, I heard a story of this thing that Elisha did, I heard a story of this, and then the author kind of compiles them all together. So it could be kind of a pious legend around the character of Elisha, something that maybe something happened and then it got blown out of proportion, and they added in details about the bears. I don't know, I wasn't there. I can't tell you if it actually happened or not, but that is one option, to say, well, this is probably a pious story that some people kind of adapted over time. But that can be an issue when we're dealing with, Holy Scripture and things like that. So option number 2 is to say, well, it happened exactly like that. Elisha called down the curse and these bears came out. It doesn't tell us that God sent the bears, so we don't really have to wrestle with saying, well, did God send the bears to kill or to maul the children? But it almost seems like it's kind of implied, right? If the prophet calls down the curse and then these bears just suddenly come out of the woods. I don't know, taking this as literal, that's what it says, that's what happened, it doesn't sit very well with me. So option number 3 is to say, well, there's probably more to this story than meets the eye. A lot of times in the Bible, it gives us very few details. Just tells us kind of bare bones, this happened, this happened, this happened. Doesn't tell us what the people were wearing, what they were thinking, really the backstory going on behind things. So in all of these stories, there's an element of just, we don't know exactly what is going on, exactly what's behind it. We just read what we do, we say, okay, and then we're left with a bunch of questions that the Bible doesn't spell out for us, that it doesn't answer. So for a case like this, for me personally, when I read something like this, I read it and I say to myself, okay, yeah, it could be that, this story kind of developed over time and maybe didn't quite happen that way. But at the same time, I think, well, what else was going on here in this scenario, in this situation, that the Bible just doesn't mention? What other factors were at play in this story? And I can tell you, sometimes that leaves me with a satisfied feeling. Sometimes it doesn't. And that's just part of reading through the Old Testament, and even some things in the New Testament, like Ananias and Sapphira falling dead at the feet of Peter. Again, a subject for another video. But the point is, when you read through Scripture, you will come across difficult things. And for some of us, the temptation then is to put it down and say, well, I don't want anything to do with this. This is crazy. This is madness. How can I follow a God with prophets who would call out bears to kill children? But I would encourage you, if you come into a situation like that, to wrestle with it. Just keep reading. See what the whole Bible illuminates about God, about who God is. And then with these stories, just keep wrestling, like Jacob wrestling with God. We might not get an answer. We might not get the answer we're looking for. We might not get the answer that we want. We might not get one at all. But I promise you, if you just keep reading, keep hanging in there, you're going to find life-giving words that will comfort you, help you. And so the point of this video is, even when you come across something difficult in the Bible, keep going. Sure, stop and ask questions, pray about it, have a dialogue with God about it if you're uncomfortable. The important thing is that you don't shut that relationship off. All right, so with that, I hope you'll have a good day. Till next time. One more thing, please don't forget to like and subscribe.